You've got your bread and butter on one hand in the business you've built and the way you serve clients. But on the other hand, you see this need for education, guidance, and to really help people who can't necessarily afford to be your client. So you're torn. Helping those people with educational content or guidance wouldn't be profitable and wouldn't likely funnel potential clients into your business, but it would be fulfilling work, it would build your personal brand, and it would further position you as the financial expert you are. It's in this conundrum type gap between being the paid service provider and being a helpful guide to those who need it most that many financial professionals find themselves feeling stuck. Which is why you want to stick around to hear DJ's perspective on his real estate investor brand versus his book and podcast helping folks navigate foreclosure. DJ, I am so happy you're here with me today. How are you doing?
I am doing awesome. How you doing, Virginia?
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to hear first up how the foreclosure fix came about. And you've told me separately that you will forever be in real estate. So how do these two concepts and maybe even brands come together for you?
So from a background perspective, I've been investing in around real estate probably for the last 16 years as a real estate investor. And when I first started, I started kind of when the real estate market was in the toilet. And so I used to go to the courthouse steps and would buy properties on the courthouse steps. And the way the courthouse works in Georgia and the way the foreclosure process works in Georgia, the first Tuesday of every month in every county in the state, they have foreclosure sales. The auctioneer comes out, which are like different banks, and bidders come out with cashier's check. And someone will say, hey, this is property on 123 Main Street. It's going for $50,000. Do I have any bids, right? And then people will start bidding it up. And that day that I was out there, a family was there and they were begging investors not to buy their house. It really stuck with me because I was looking at what happened that these folks are now coming to the courthouse steps to beg people not to buy their house. Like, were there some exit ramps? Were there things that were supposed to happen that they didn't do, or were they just taken advantage of? And so that kind of stuck with me throughout my real estate investing career. Fast forward over the years, gained more experience and began to talk to a lot of homeowners who were facing foreclosure. And one of the things my wife said to me when she heard me on the phone talking to a homeowner, she was like, you get really passionate when you're talking to these homeowners about foreclosure. And as time progressed, I just didn't have enough time to talk to as many homeowners as I would like. And so basically what I decided to do is distill kind of all my learning, all the tips, tricks, and practices that I had into kind of a book called The Foreclosure Fix. And from there, that also created the platform of the podcast and the YouTube channel and all that stuff. And now it's a movement where we're helping homeowners take back control and escape foreclosure or just not get run over by the foreclosure process and allowing them to be in a situation where they make the decisions about how they move forward, making the best decision for them and their family at that time. And so that's where it started. That's where we are now. And it's a labor of love. And I'm excited about where it's going in the future.
Very cool. Okay, so you've been investing in real estate, from what it sounds like, at least some single family homes, potentially other types of properties as well. And that's your main thing. That's your bread and butter. There's, a variety of maybe flips or remodel and rent it out type of, I'm sure you've got a variety of different strategies that you are working on. But let's dive into this a little bit deeper, because if you are helping a family avoid foreclosure, I'm assuming you're not able to invest in that piece of property. So it kind of feels like, how does this help you? Like you said, it's a labor of love. I hear that. So talk to me about your mindset in, hey, I want to invest in this real estate. That means I need to buy properties. But over here, I'm going to help families so that they don't lose their properties. That doesn't necessarily seem like an endeavor that drives profit for you, but it's more of something that's where your heart is. So Talk to me about why you chose both of these paths, and do they support each other?
Well, there is a disconnect, right? I would like to buy more properties from people who may be going in foreclosure, but the reality of the situation is there are more than enough opportunities for me as a real estate investor here in Georgia to go after. That's number one. Number two, if you look at where wealth is built for individuals, most individuals have some of the greatest amounts of wealth in their home. And if you look at people who own homes over a period of time versus those who don't, you will see a widespread gap in their net worth. And so when I think about it from the homeowner's perspective, you have achieved something very great in the fact that you own a home. And now your ability to keep that home or profit from the sale of that home is indicative on what you do if you're facing foreclosure. And so I look at it as by helping those folks, I'm doing them or their generation, right? A good deed that inevitably will come back to me in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's karma, whatever you want to call it, it's going to come back to me. The other part about that is there's a million different ways to help somebody. Anybody who's been a real estate investor or just a business owner for any point in time, you understand that there are your target customers and there are customers who are not really your ideal customers. And for me as a real estate investor, my customers are people who want to sell their homes, whether it's a tired landlord who says, I've done this for 30 years and it's time for me to hang it up. You can buy the rental property. Or if it's a homeowner who says, hey, I'm moving from Georgia to Texas and I'm just trying to get out of here, right? I don't have to buy the home from the homeowner who says, I really want to stay here and I just got to figure out a way to do it, right? And so I look at it as all those things. By helping those people who are the most vulnerable, I in turn will be blessed and will be able to find more opportunities from those people who I really, really want to buy from.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. Thank you so much for kind of diving down that, because I know that in the space, it's a very broad space of financial professionals, right? You've got anybody from, business finance where they're, CPAs or attorneys or bookkeepers or, in any way, shape, or form, they're serving businesses on the financial side. Or you've got the personal finance side where you've got financial advisors, money coaches, folks that help people through bankruptcy. There's such a broad array of these financial professionals. And yet the common thread that I see through all of them is that there is this helping heart part of them that wants to serve people who actually aren't their ideal clients, because they just want to help them, because they see that issue and they see a problem and they know they could provide solutions to those people, even though it doesn't make them money. And a lot of times there's that divide between, well, that would be fulfilling work because I'd be proud of it and I would love to do it, but it doesn't make me money. So I'm just going to stay focused over here. But what I see in your brand is that you've used both sides of this to create a personal brand. First thing on your website, it's consultant, developer, realtor, and investor. So you've got these prestigious titles, but you've also got this brand over here that helps people. So could you walk through some of the mental challenges or steps that you took when you started thinking about writing a book or starting a podcast or any of these like content driven pieces on the foreclosure fix side, knowing that, hey, this is more of a labor of love. It's not really going to directly feed my real estate empire here, but it does build my personal brand. So, help me through some of those thought processes that you had back when, right? So like before you wrote your book, before you're a published author, all of those, all of that time frame.
Well, Virginia, first I want to say thank you for that compliment because I don't know if what I have is a real estate empire, but hey, if you speak it into existence from your mouth to God's ears, right? But
Yes.
the other thing I'll say is the big thing that allows me to move forward in confidence with anything I do is just kind of a faith and a resolute ownership of if this is kind of what God's called me to do in this season, I'm going to run after it. That's number one. But then the other thing too is that I look at what is going to be the downside of whatever I do. So if I understand what the downside is of any business opportunity, of any venture, and I also understand the upside, I can kind of manage the risk. So for example, if you're going to a restaurant and you look at the menu and you're going like to Chipotle, I know that if I take my wife and kids to Chipotle, worst case scenario, I'm out of $100. And that's like everybody going wild, getting drinks. You got a burrito and a burrito bowl. You know what I mean? Like,
Extra
I can
guacamole.
manage that, exactly. When I look at my wallet and say, cool, I got, a couple $100, I can go to this restaurant. But if you go to like a 5-star, dining restaurant, where everything's a la carte, bottles of wine are, $500. Well, you know that you may be spending $5,000, right? And so the first thing I always tell people is evaluate what the downside is or the risk is of whatever you're looking to do. And so for me, what I said is that I'm willing to put a certain amount of money towards this endeavor. And I looked at it as if it went great, well, it will bring back X-fold return. If it didn't go great, well, this was an investment in my continued education and my learning and my brand and things like that. And so no matter what, I knew that this was the amount that I was willing to invest. And so the first thing I would tell folks to think about is how much are you willing to invest and sacrifice? And that investment may not just be hardcore dollars. It may be in time or hours that you are going to give up to learn your craft or to spend writing or to spend creating articles or to spend creating content. But figure out what that investment looks like for you. And that was the first thing I did. The next thing I did, I said, all right, how does whatever I'm doing align with the brand that I currently have? Like, does it hurt it? Does it hinder it? Are there conflicts of interest, or does it, position me in a way that I don't want to be seen as or hurts my existing brand? And what I looked at is like, I really didn't have an existing brand. Don't get me wrong. I had counterparties and people who knew me for what I did for a job, but I didn't really have a brand. I didn't really have a social media presence and things like that. And so for me, it was like, if anything, this just lets people know what I do now. And so it kind of positioned me as like, I do something now. So before I knew you were doing a real estate thing, but now I know specifically what you say you do in real estate. By the way, I do all these other things, but for example, I know what it positions you as. The last thing is what I learned from a friend a long time ago who was quite successful. They told me that although they had great success in their business career, what most people knew them for were their philanthropic efforts. And that kind of resonated with me because this person was wildly successful from a business perspective. But what people knew them for was the stuff that they did that made absolutely no money. And so when I put all those three things together, I said, I'm super passionate about homeowners facing foreclosure. I have a message to give to them. I know that the likelihood of them being able to give me anything monetarily is slim to none because they can't even pay their mortgage. So let alone they're not going to sign up for a course. They're not going to sign up for a self-help situation. At most, they may buy a book, but even then, by the time you're facing foreclosure, you're probably not just thinking about books. You just like, you just want a solution. But I knew that this was a group of people who needed help from as many sources they could. And so I put all that together and I said, this is how much I'm spending. This is how much I'm willing to invest from a commitment perspective. This is what the products are going to be. And then from there, we're just going to see how it goes and how it plays out. And the last thing, I gave myself a timeline. I said, hey, I'm going to go do this for, a year and a half. And then when that year and a half comes, we're going to see how we pivot, how we move, how we change.
Okay, so I love several things about this. First, I run into so many people, even financial professionals, which you would think their mind would be on budget immediately. And usually, surprisingly, it's not. They come to me saying, oh my gosh, like I want to launch a podcast. I want to be on YouTube. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to boost my personal brand. All the desires and wishes, the wish list is this long. When I ask them, okay, what does the timeline look like for you? How long are you willing to commit to this? What does the budget look like for you? Because with the answers to those questions, I can design all right, let's do a weekly show. You've got video included because your budget fits. And I can work in pieces that would fit that budget and timeline. But you'd be shocked to find out most of the time they're like, oh, I don't know. I haven't outlined that yet. I haven't thought about that. Or the opposite. They're more of thinking like, oh, I want to do like 10 or 20 episodes, thinking that will get them this long-term recognition or this large audience of ideal clients, right? When from what we know from research in the podcast space, I mean, you need 60, 70 plus episodes before people start calling you up saying, hey, I heard your podcast. I'm ready to be a client. So there's this long-term strategy there, the budget, the timeline. How did you arrive at the budget, at this 18-month timeline? Because that is a long time to commit to something, which I commend you for. How did you get to those numbers?
That's a tough question. I don't think it just really came all at once. I'm like, oh, this is the number. I think, you start at one number and then you realize that number's not big enough, right? Because at the end of the day, you would love to be like, oh, I'm going to spend, $500. But then you look at like getting a decent camera and getting a good microphone and making sure you have the stuff. You're already in just an equipment for like, $1,000 to produce a good podcast, right? So you have some realities there. But then if you're going to get good help and the right help, and what are the demands on your time and how much time do you have to dedicate? All those things change the cost. And so it was through numerous conversations with numerous folks and companies like yours and things like that, where you kind of got to gauge to see, okay, you have people who are on the high range, people who are on the lower range. You draw a line in the sand and say, I need to be kind of in this area for what I'm trying to do. The other thing that you have to take in mind or consider is how much are you spending on marketing currently in your organization? So as a real estate business, we do spend money on marketing now, right? It's part of what we do. And so the thought process is that this should help your marketing. This should be adjacent to building your brand. So maybe you can restructure some of those dollars, not all of them, but just maybe a small portion to go towards this. Or you can kind of strategize to say, are there places that I'm spending money that I think it's helping my brand, but it's not? And so maybe doing an audit of what you're doing currently and figuring out, are there ways to pull out resources or dollars from other areas? And it was through kind of having an idea of how much I thought would be worthwhile. Because in my business, one lead could be a few $1,000s or it could be significantly more, right? And so the way I looked at it, it was, if I only got one lead from all this stuff I did, what was the return I needed to have to break even? And so I was looking at that break even analysis. And so for me, I said, hey, I got $25,000, right, that I can spend towards this over this 18 months time frame. So if I get one lead from all this stuff I'm doing over 18 months, and that one lead makes me $25,000, I would have paid for this, and I would have basically created a brand that did not exist previously, that lives in perpetuity. And so that's the way I rationalized it. Now, for a different type of business where maybe you're a smaller ticket business, you may have to have less. And then for a bigger ticket business, you may have to have more. But basically just identifying where you think that break even is, and what matches your timeline and the available resources you have.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so the Foreclosure Fix brand is separate from your real estate investment piece, even though it does tie together. So you're not looking for an ROI necessarily that's directly like someone heard your podcast or picked up your book and, hey, let's invest together, or here's a property for you to invest in or whatever. There's not that direct like client acquisition piece from these couple of pieces of content. So with that being said, we've got ROI instead in the form of a personal brand, in the form of like notoriety. Maybe you're getting speaking opportunities. Maybe you're able to network with other real estate investors. Like, talk to me more about what are the ROI pieces that you're looking at, since they aren't necessarily direct client acquisition from your show?
Yeah. So as I said before, I think no matter what, the first thing for me is just goodwill, right? Helping your fellow man or woman and just being someone who is giving them good advice at a difficult time. So that's the first ROIP. So even if no one ever calls you, just knowing that you got that good juju out there, if you want to call it, or good karma. But
Yeah.
for me, I just feel like it's good to help other people, and having that available and out there for people is a blessing. That's number one. It's blessed to wake up where in 15 or 20 years, my kids will say, oh, my dad was doing this, right? And so I think that if I get no return financially on it, that's enough for me. That's the first thing I'll say. However, when I look at the dollars and cents, the way it typically works out is like anything else. I meet with homeowners all the time, and I'm typically in their house trying to procure their property or trying to make a transaction work. And so, Virginia, when I meet with you, you don't know me for Adam. You just know DJ Olojo either sent me a postcard saying they want to buy my house, or I know from a friend that DJ Olojo helps, sell their house or sold them a house or whatever. So you call me up and say, hey, DJ, I need you to just come by. I'm looking to sell my house. And you got 15 or 20 other people who are doing the exact same thing, coming to see the house. As a homeowner, all you're caring about who's going to give you the most money, right? That's all you care about. And so I can't win that race all the time because sometimes I'm not the highest offer. But one of the races that I can win is being the person who shows up with multiple solutions and who has that credibility that you can build off the bat. And one of the ways you do that is when you Google me, you'll see my name, you'll see the book and things like that. An example of this is that I went to go meet with a lady who was in her 70s, and she had a nice house. She received one of our postcards, and she was planning to move from Georgia to Alabama. And, she had multiple postcards from people because her home fit that perfect description of like age range, how long she owned it for, kind of that sweet spot where people are typically going to make a move because they've owned it for more than 5 years. Their mortgage was paid down significantly. So it's kind of an indicator that that person is going to be making a life move at a certain amount of time. And so she basically was saying that she was going to sell her house and she was looking for the best offer. And this was not a dilapidated house. It wasn't a house that we typically buy, because the houses we typically buy, the way in which we make our money is that we can renovate cheaper than the average homeowner. So if a homeowner is going to pay $100,000 on a renovation, we probably can do it for $75,000. And that profit, that $25,000 profit, is kind of where we make our money, if that makes sense. And so this house was in good condition. It didn't need any work. And so we really couldn't help her from the perspective of buying her house. But one of the things I told her, I said, hey, I really can't help you from buying your house, but I think on the open market, you can get, this number for your house. Would you like me to list this property for you, or would you like me to help you with that process? She had multiple people going through there. She said, no, I'm not interested in that. Don't worry about it. But then a few days later, she called me back and she said, hey, you got a book and a podcast. She was like, oh, I liked you better than I like these other people. Can you come help me with my house? And so from that perspective, I don't know if it was the book or the podcast or the fact that, I'm just a handsome, charming, likable guy who's very, very humble, of course.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, she liked me enough to call me back, and I was able to make, a small commission off that property. And so long story short, I don't know if it was the book. I don't know if it was the foreclosure fix platform or if it was just my years of experience and talking with homeowners, but it's the amalgamation of all those things that created opportunities and that will continue to create opportunities. And so I think when people are looking at what they're doing to build their personal brand or build their business, you can't look at it as linear, as if I do X, Y will come. You have to look at it as I am doing X, knowing that over the years that I am in this business and adding value, that it will come back to me in some way, shape, or form. I don't know when, I don't know how fast, I don't know how soon, but it will come back to me as long as I continue to add value to the people who I'm looking to help.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. That is such a beautiful perspective. And I know that some people listening are thinking like, wow, that's such a shift, because it's kind of natural for people to say like, well, if I create this thing, I expect this, profit or these number of course sales or these number of clients, to come my way. And that is my ROI. They're really looking for that direct exchange and not necessarily being open to like this abundance mindset, like you say, of, hey, put the good juju out there and it's going to come back to me in some way. So thank you so much for sharing that shift.
And I want to make sure I highlight this for those. I think one of the things that you can't discount is the way in which you grow when you do things that are uncomfortable or you stretch yourself, right? And so part of the having the budget and saying you're going to go do something and telling the world you're going to do it is it's forcing you to go out there and do something. So right now I'm signed up in March to do a half marathon. And I'm somebody who hates running. Like I hate running. Like pretty much I've only had to run if you were chasing me. Like, like I played basketball, which is like short sprints, which is not a problem. But just, running for the sake of running, I'm not that guy. Like I don't get out there and say, "Oh, I'm just so free, it clears my head." I'm like, "No, my back hurts, my leg hurts. I want to stop, can we do something else?" And so, long story short, I have told enough people that I am doing a half marathon that if I don't do it, I will be ashamed. Like, like they will like, basically call me out. And so now it is forcing me, like when I run or when I work out, to work harder because I know that I am accountable to all these people. And so part of spending that money, part of telling people that, oh, I'm doing this podcast or I'm going to write this book or part of telling the world what you're planning to do is also holding you accountable to becoming and developing that better version of yourself. And I'll tell you by March, I'll be a better runner and maybe I'll like it a little bit, but the process to get there sucks. But at the end of the day, it's just what you're able to do when you are able to commit to something and be diligent about going towards that goal. Even if you don't hit the goal, you're still going to be a lot better than where you were when you were just kind of contemplating and thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah. So that alludes to the, personal growth behind the mic that a lot of people don't recognize happens just naturally without you even like trying, thinking like, I'm going to start a podcast because I'm going to grow personally. Like that's not what happens. But there is a significant amount of personal development, confidence building, your ability to speak your mind more clearly, more concisely behind the mic, on camera, on stage. So could you speak a little bit to like where you were when you first started the podcast? Were you nervous to get behind the mic?
I came from a background in which I used to give a lot of presentations. And so I would be in front of boards, in front of, executives, one-on-ones. And so I've always enjoyed talking with people. I had no problem kind of giving a prepared talk or something like that. I enjoyed it. It gave me a little bit of an adrenaline rush and things like that. However, one of the big differences with podcasting or just being behind the mic or being behind a camera is that oftentimes when I'm giving a presentation to a large audience, I can see their facial responses. Like, I can see that you are laughing at my jokes. I can see that you are smiling, making me feel more comfortable. I can see that what I just said didn't land well, so I can kind of readjust it. But when you are doing a podcast, especially a solo podcast, when you don't have anybody else that you're looking at and you're just talking into the camera, it is a feeling of, I don't really know what's going on. Like, I don't know if you are liking what I'm saying. I don't know if I sound crazy. I feel like I'm just talking to myself. And so it's a very unusual feeling at first, and you have to get used to it. You also notice all the fillers and ums and likes and whatever words you want to use when you are trying to process or think through. You notice all those because in a presentation, you give it and then you move on. You don't typically watch a recording. But when you do a podcast, you're listening to your recording, or if you're the one editing it, you see all the fillers and things like that. And so it is definitely something where you have to get your 10,000 hours in. I would say I'm a lot better behind the camera and microphone than I was 18 months ago or 2 years ago, but it's still something that you can just get better and better at. And it is a process. And when you go back and you listen to your first podcast, you are going to cringe. When you listen to your 50th podcast, you're going to cringe. But the more and more you do it, the better you get. And it creates a skill set that now I can go on CNN, I can go on Fox, I can go on the one and only Virginia Elders podcast. I can go wherever and be in a situation where I feel comfortable to talk and give my opinion in a hopefully succinct way. and make sure that the audience resonates with it. The other thing that is so important about just practicing and doing it is that you begin to not care about the critics. Because, like, when I go on YouTube, and I don't know if you know me or have seen my personal brand out there. I'm a bow tie guy. Like, so I love bow ties. It's kind of what I do. If you see me at conferences, I'm typically in a bow tie. I do wear them multiple times a week, but if you catch me in the field working with the crews, I won't have a bow tie on because my prices typically go up from contractors when I rock a bow tie. But that being said, I've gotten negative comments about the bow tie where it's like, this guy looks stuck up. He looks like a wannabe professor. Like, you get just evil comments from nowhere. I'm like, I think I'm a nice guy. You get all these bad comments, and then you get comments like that people just think what you're saying is dumb or wrong. But it just helps you build a super thick skin. And now when you go somewhere, the confidence that you have when you're speaking is through the roof because you've seen all the internet trolls tell you nonsense. And so it's like, you may disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. But when you get your own podcast or you get your own book, we can have that argument. But until then, you're listening to me. You know what I mean? So it's all those things that kind of help build confidence in the way you move forward. And just that process, you can't shortcut it. You can't get to being good at any craft without going through the steps needed.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that because that is a big piece. There's a few things I'm hearing in your brand and your voice is that you chose to do this because you just want to do it. Some of my most successful clients who are getting the calls from their podcast and the folks that have been with me the longest producing, hundreds of episodes with me, they do their show because they want to, not necessarily because we're looking for an ROI or because this builds my personal brand. And sure, those are goals that go along with it, but they're creating content because they want to, because they are seeking an opportunity to help people. And then, of course, the personal development piece goes into it. Like you said, they've got hundreds of episodes under their belt. So when they hear something negative from a troll online or even from someone in person, it's like, yeah, okay, well, you can talk to me when you have 300 episodes down, right? Like I hear a lot of similarities between your story and your perspective on things that parallel directly with some of my most successful clients. So that just is an indication of like, hey, you want to be successful with your podcast or your personal brand or, through writing a book or whatever, you do this stuff because you want to, not necessarily because someone else thinks you should or because of like this guru in your industry does it and you're copying them. It has to be this intrinsic desire of your own to make you actually follow through with some of that stuff. One thing I was going to ask you is you shared with me that you're actually backing off a little bit from your frequency at which you publish your podcast. So moving from a weekly show and backing down a little bit to maybe every other week or just monthly. Can you share with me a little bit of the idea behind that and your plans or like the thought process of why that feels right to you at this time?
Yeah. So, as I told you, when I started, I put a financial number out there on how much I wanted to spend, I was willing to spend until we started to see maybe more results. We hit that number. And then, but we also hit that timeline I told you. We actually went more than 18 months. We went maybe like 20 months or something like that. And we were still getting kind of good reviews and likes and clicks. But at the end of the day, I think our target demographic we were hitting and not necessarily saturating, but we were hitting. The other thing is when I looked at the financial metrics, as I told you, I look at what's the downside versus what's the upside. And I figured that I wanted this to continue because I enjoy it. And the book lives in perpetuity. And we are still helping people all the time through that modality. But I didn't necessarily need to be actively involved week after week trying to produce content because my schedule is busy and because I'm working on different ventures that are equally as important to me. And so instead of scrapping this one, I said, let's basically turn down the cadence. which one gives me more time that when I do produce the content, my mind is there. I'm not just out here producing a crappy episode every week versus, me producing one or two episodes a month that are quality, or maybe even repurposing episodes from other podcasts that make sense to my listener base, right? And so that made sense both from a energy and effort perspective, but also from a financial perspective. Because now instead of me paying a professional to edit 4 podcasts or 5 podcasts in a month, I'm only paying them to edit 1 podcast. And so from a financial perspective, that made a lot more sense. The other thing that we looked at was what's the best thing for me in this season and what gives me life in this season. And because we were doing all platforms and we were doing posting every day. And in all honesty, I hate posting. Although I would create the content and I have great content, the actual process of making hooks and doing all that stuff, like, it's just not me. Like, I would upload some pictures, send them some videos, and they would do everything for me. Obviously, you pay for that. But I also said, what is the benefit of that? And so now I just post whenever I feel like it. So it may be one week I'm posting every day, and the next week I may not post for a whole month, but I don't feel any pressure around the frequency of it. I don't feel any need to do a certain cadence because someone's telling me I need to do this to get a business to another place. When I feel strongly about something or I think it's something that my target audience and demographic wants to hear or needs to hear, I put it out right away. And I don't care if it's filtered. I'm saying I don't care about filters or lighting. Like, I could be driving, my phone could be shaking. I want to get you the content. And so I don't care about all those things. I just want you to get the message I'm trying to put out. And for me, that is the best, the most organic way in order to have longevity. And that's the way it came back to me. I can do a podcast a month for the next 5 years or 6 years if I want to. If I had to do it weekly, I probably would burn out before the end of the year. And so thinking about longevity and thinking about I want to have this brand live on for a long time allows me to take a step back. It's almost equivalent to working out. If you are working out every day and you're doing an intense, hardcore workout, you're only gonna be able to do that for so long before you take a break and before you rest. Versus if you say, hey, one day a week, I'm gonna have this intense, hard workout, but every other day is gonna be lighter, you can sustain that for a lot longer. And what I'm looking at is sustainability and longevity and not just a quick burst.
So, speaking of sustainability, when it comes to producing content, you can loop in blogs, social media posts, YouTube videos, like whatever you want to consider for your brand producing content. What have been the biggest challenges or roadblocks? I mean, I think you've overcome a few of them just because you've outsourced to save yourself time. But, is it equipment? Is it tech? Is it software troubles? Is it photo shoots? Is it like, what are some of your biggest challenges when it comes to producing content?
I would say it's all the above, right? Everything's a problem. And what I mean by that is that you're getting thrown into this new world where if you're not around it or know how to navigate it, like, you don't know where to start. Like, you don't know what's most important to you. Like, you don't know if it's the camera, you don't know if you need a good reel, you don't know if you need a good video. You just don't know. And so just the overwhelming amount of information and the differing opinions and how to create content for one platform versus another platform, short form content versus long form content, how to chop up content into multiple pieces. Like, you got all these things where it's like, I just don't know. And so I think the hard part is understanding what are you trying to get out of what you're doing, and you don't know because you've never done it. And so it's this weird place you're in where in your mind you think you're going to be, the next Joe Rogan, and but the reality of getting from where you are to there is a million miles away. And so just understanding what your goal is the hardest part. And it's backing into, okay, my goal is not to have a million followers. My goal is to maybe have something go viral. Well, your approach to doing that is going to be very different than if your goal was to get to 10,000 followers, or if your goal is not to have any followers, but it's to sell a course or get people to a landing page. Like, all those different goals require different levels of execution and different strategies to get there. And so understanding what you're trying to accomplish is the hardest part. And then building your success plan from there is where you can miss many pitfalls, but then also put yourself in a position where you are successful at getting to what your outcome is. The last thing I'll say is not allowing the goalpost to move is the other part. They say that comparison is the thief of joy. When you start podcasting or you start writing blogs or you start anything, you're going to compare yourself to other people. And I think what you need to do is look at it as not how good is my podcast versus Virginia's, but how good is podcast 5 versus podcast 1? How good is article 1 versus article 10? How good is, book 1 versus good 2? And that type of comparison, it's you versus you. And I think that if you can kind of keep that in the forefront of your head, about you getting better day in and day out at the craft, that also helps with some of the noise that you'll be hearing as you start down that journey and that process.
Yeah, I love that. So you also shared with me separately a little bit of a thought process around why you chose to outsource certain things and why, even if you do move to producing just one episode per month, why you're still outsourcing that. So talk me through the choice to outsource and the cost and time value versus what you could be doing with your time and that whole thought process there.
You hear lots of different professionals and business leaders always talk about, your cost per hour or doing things that, are in your wheelhouse and all that verbiage and language that people like throw out there. I do agree with a lot of that. But for me, what it comes down to is yes, my cost per hour is more than what it will cost someone else to produce the podcast for me. But more importantly, it's not just the cost per hour, it's also, do I want to do it? Like, do I like doing it? Because if I like doing it, then it's not a problem for me to produce my own podcast. Like if I enjoy, cutting and clipping and working in, whatever different softwares, GarageBand or, Riverside FM, whatever may be the case, then, and I enjoy it and it's cathartic, great. You know what I mean? I enjoy cooking and I definitely could, get a home chef or, pay one of these meal programs like Factor or whoever to send me meals and it would be a lot cheaper, but I enjoy the process. And so for me, it's well worth it to do it. It's cathartic. And so if that's how you feel about producing content, then be my guest, definitely do it yourself. But if it's something that you don't want to do, definitely outsource it. At the end of the day, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you are a financial professional and you're making, $350 an hour, $500 an hour, or even $250 when you are sitting down with the client, helping them, at the end of the day, pay somebody else that money, get your hour back and go work with the client for an hour. At least you're building a relationship. At least you're pushing things forward. At least you are helping your business grow versus wasting your time doing something that you don't have a desire to do. And I think about anything that I want to do long term. If I don't like it and it's not a prerequisite for me to do it, I'm going to stop doing it. So, I work out not because I like it, but because of the fact that I know it's helping me prolong my life. If it wasn't, I would stop yesterday. You know what I mean? And so that's the same way I look at things that I'm doing for work or things I'm doing around my business and my brand is if I want to do this for the long term, I need to set it up so that long term it can be sustainable. And for me, definitely outsourcing things like, podcast editing or portions of the business around marketing that I'm not good at is well worth the money I pay, because the other part is that they won't get done. I would dread the process of recording and then editing, and then it goes from something that was supposed to come out weekly or bi-weekly or monthly to every 6 months, or it just doesn't happen. And it's like, oh, that I tried that, but it didn't work.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us that, kind of behind the scenes perspective there. As we wrap up, would you tell us kind of what's on the horizon for you, where to find you, where to follow you? I know some people listening are just curious about your brand and what you do. Maybe you got some fellow real estate investors listening here. They might be reaching out. So Give us a little overview of like what's coming up for you in 2025 and where can we follow you?
First, if you have not taken a moment to like and subscribe to your homegirl Virginia Elders podcast, you got to do that. That's the first thing I'll say, right? So if you're not liking, if you're not subscribing, if you're not giving 5-star reviews, what are you doing? You're wasting time. Go ahead and do it right now. I know you're on your phone. All you gotta do is hit that Apple button. Go ahead and give her a 5-star review. That's the first thing I'll say. If you're looking for me, online everywhere at theforeclosurefix.com. DJ Olojo on all socials. And if you're in the Metro Atlanta area, I'm here local. Atlanta's my playground as it pertains to real estate, and so I'm in the city, willing and dealing and doing all that stuff. So love to connect with other real estate investors. And if you're a homeowner out there facing foreclosure, definitely connect with our content on the Foreclosure Fix. If we can help you in any way, we want to see you get to a better spot and take control of your financial future. So definitely look at us. Our book is available on all platforms, audiobook, hardback, paperback, all that stuff. So that's me in a nutshell. And so grateful and appreciate you and your audience for the opportunity to kind of share what we're doing at the Foreclosure Fix and what it looks like moving forward.
And thank you so much for giving us such a full overview of the behind the scenes thought processes and systems and budget and all the things that financial professionals might be thinking about as they look at creating content. And so you provided some really good advice here. Thank you so much, DJ.
Hey, no problem, Virginia. Again, appreciate the opportunity. And one of the last things I'll leave your listeners with is I'm about to turn 40 here later this year. And so the reality is that you may be in a situation where you have lived more life than you have left, right? As I begin to think about that, right, it really kind of dawns on me because I see my parents aging. I've lost loved ones. I even talked about one of my cousins before we got on that, that we lost and all these other things. And so when you kind of come to that reality of life is short and life is finite and it moves so quickly, I think that for those of you out there who are looking at, what do you do next in your business or what do you next and how you kind of go to the next level, one of the things I'll tell you is that if you could think about what you have been called to do in this season, if you can think about the regrets you may have on your deathbed as you didn't maybe take the shot to produce that content you wanted to produce or start that business you were hoping to start, even if you started on the side in a small way in the basement, you never want to look up and say shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? You want to look up and say, hey, in this life I was given, I left it all here, right? I did what I think God has called me to do in life. And so that's what I want to remind you as you're kind of contemplating what your next move is as a business professional, as an entrepreneur, as a financial services professional, as a podcaster, right? Make sure that you will be comfortable with the outcome. If you don't do it, and if you don't take that shot that you want to take.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good advice there. And I didn't realize we were so close in age. I turned 40 last year. So happy early birthday, DJ.
Wow, we're close in age. I was thinking that, you were, a teeny bopper, but hey, it's all good. You got good genes. So it works out great.
Thank you.
No
Yes.
problem.
Happy birthday to us, man. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Virginia. Have a blessed day.